to Manny's TV Talk, where we will talk about all of our favorite reality TV shows and news surrounding them. Grab a snack, a drink, and get comfortable because this starts now.
Hey everybody, welcome in. So we're talking about one last time the Real Housewives of New Jersey. We made it to the third part of the Real Housewives of New Jersey reunion for season 13. You know, everybody was all excited about the Vanderpump Rules reunion, and while we watched it, I think this reunion definitely surpassed the drama and all of that excitement. So let's begin this third part. So the husbands are joining. The tension in the room was out of this world. Frank is there, but Dolores has her new man Pauley behind her, so Frank had to sit next to Joe. That was a little bit weird. Maybe this will probably be Frank's last reunion, I think. But they begin with some lighthearted introductions. You know, they mentioned the calendar. But then when Joe is asked how he's doing, he says that his heart is beating very fast. And it's funny because that's what Teresa said in part 1. One of the things Andy gets out of the way first is why Louis said that he wore Teresa's father's pajamas. He says, you know, that came out wrong, that he once wore some sweats or something that belonged to him, but it was in an endearing way, and that the point of him saying that to Joe was because he was trying to connect with him and have a good relationship as brother-in-laws. Joe responds and says, you know, I want to believe you, but I don't anymore at this point. Joe says that he wanted to have a big, happy family, but he says that Louis screwed him over again and again. So then Teresa jumps in and then Melissa jumps in. It was a total mess because they wouldn't shut up and they start arguing. Teresa says, he's my brother. Melissa says, he's my husband. And then Melissa says, I thought you never wanted to see us again. And Teresa answers and says, I don't. So let me talk to my brother one last time. But before they get into all the mess, they go down to some scenes that we saw all season of the men together. You know, the New Jersey men always have a lot of fun, so they joke about themselves for a little bit. Then one of the questions is to Frank, you know, how is he feeling, having a hard time letting go of Dolores? And he says that, you know, she's one of his best friends. But a good thing is that him and Brittany, his girlfriend, are getting a house, so he won't be with David anymore, so that's very good. And him and Pauley are also in a really good place. They ask Bill why he spends so much time in the pool house. Him and Jennifer try to downplay it. They talk about the therapy and he says that he has eased up, but this man looks so checked out. And Jennifer is never going to leave him because of the lifestyle that he gives her. Let's just keep it real. But to go back to Dolores real quick, Pauley says, because they ask him, are you going to get married? And he says, Dolores doesn't want to get married. But she turns around to him and says, that's not true. But here's the thing, like we discovered a few weeks ago, he's not legally divorced, so he can't marry her. But I did find it a little weird that Pauley was kind of dancing around the question of his ex-wife and if he would divorce her or not. I did notice that. Okay, but then it gets heated. Frank had alluded that Louis had done something bad to Frankie Jr., who worked for him. Frank and Joe really want to say what it is, but Dolores quickly steps in, more than she has this entire season. And she says, no, Joe Gorga, stop. So Frankie, you know, was hired by Louis, and she's like, that's all I care about, and I'm thankful that Louis gave him a job, and this ends now. So it ended there because after hearing what Dolores said, neither one of them wanted to say it anymore. And even Melissa told Joe, like, no, if she doesn't want to talk about it, don't talk about it. But then Rachel's husband, John Fuda, steps in and says, I have a question to Louis. Why did you bring up my kid into this and investigated his mother? This man, John, had an entire, thick envelope, and he seemed very certain that Louis did this. Of course, Louis and Teresa are denying any wrongdoing, and they're saying, take it out on Bo Dietl, who's the private investigator. But oh my gosh, Teresa and Louis just looked so dumb, because Louis clearly said in the finale that he had this private investigator who had information on all of them. But now he's claiming that he didn't hire him, but he's claiming that they are friends. Rachel says that she even saw Louis and Teresa with this investigator having dinner. And then Andy says that production called him, that there's a security guard downstairs, and Louis confirms that there is, that Bo Dietl sent over to him because of the threats that they have been getting. So now Louis is saying that there's somebody who's trying to threaten his life. So that's why Bo Dietl is doing an investigation. And then Teresa says that Margaret is the one behind it. I mean, this couldn't get any crazier. They are saying that Margaret has been talking to this person who wants to destroy Louis. And I'm pretty sure they are referring to his ex, who has been alleging a lot of things that he did in the few weeks that have just gone by. Margaret then presents the proof that Louis threatened her son. And Frank and Joe say that Louis launched a smear campaign against all of them. But of course, he is denying it. Okay, then we move on to the pizza business scandal. So Louis says that Joe came to him with this idea. And as Louis is trying to explain the story, Melissa chimes in, then Teresa chimes in, and it was so childish. They just kept calling each other names, acting like 5-year-olds. Andy was very fed up with it because they wouldn't shut up. And then Andy asks John, well, you're someone who has done a lot of business dealings. What do you think about this situation? And as he's about to say something, Teresa just wouldn't be quiet. And Andy lost it completely and he screamed at her. He said, "Let him talk!" I mean, he was very angry and she sure shut up after that. Then Gorga brings up Dina Manzo's husband and that Louis screwed him over as well in a business dealing. They are arguing back and forth, and then Joe drops a bomb. He says, "You are a woman abuser, man. That's why I don't like you. I've been holding it in for so long." I was so shocked that he actually said it. It was very intense. So since Joe is there, Andy tells him what Teresa said earlier about Jacqueline, and that she said that Joe was hanging out with Giudice's old business partner. And then Frank steps in because he was Gorga's attorney at the time, and he said that Joe never showed up to testify against Giudice or Teresa. Andy also tells Teresa that her standing for Jacqueline all of a sudden now is bizarre, and she tries to say that it's not and that it's normal, but Andy's like, "Come on, Teresa. I mean, years of you trashing her." And they showed the footage. They never got along. So that's what Teresa, I can't really trust her. And then Joe is asked by Andy if he regrets not going to the wedding. And he says no. The pizza thing had just happened recently. And Louis trying to say that his wife was cheating on him was definitely not helping, which I feel like it's a very fair reason not to go to someone's wedding. Wouldn't you guys agree? And then Louis tries to justify what he said about the cheating allegations, but surprisingly, here's the thing I noticed. Joe and Melissa had answers for everything, so they were for sure winning. Like every single thing Teresa and Louis were saying, they were saying the truth. Joe and Melissa were. So I was like, wow. And I will also say, Louis was saying a lot of things under his breath that were kind of scary. Like, he would be like, "Don't mess with me. We'll see about that. Let's play." So it was very crazy. I definitely think they were the ones that ended up looking the craziest, were Louis and Teresa. And, okay, so y'all remember a while ago, Joe said that Gia called him to say that he could do much better than Melissa? Well, they wanted to put that rumor to rest, so Teresa calls Gia. She picks up and she says that it isn't true. But Melissa says, like, why would he make that up? And then Teresa says, well, it's because he's married to you. And Teresa gets emotional. She says that it's very disgraceful, everything that has happened. She says that her and Joe were best friends. She cries. She gets up and leaves. She says that he should feel ashamed. And as she's leaving, she screams, "And don't come following me!" She's then somewhere backstage, And she says that she doesn't want Joe to be there to go follow her to fix things. But the funny thing is, Joe wasn't even thinking about going to find her. And then she again FaceTimes Gia, and Gia's like, don't cry. In the meantime, Jennifer Aydin, aka Teresa's sidekick, is there saying, you guys, Louis told me he never hired a private investigator. I mean, come on, like if he would really tell you. But Andy does go over to go get Teresa. Now Louis, all of a sudden, is saying that Gia, what she actually told Joe is that he could do better in that moment and go to the wedding. So it's just so... The amount of spins that they're making, and it's crazy because Louis and Teresa are slowly digging their own grave. But eventually they all go back to the couches, but there's really nothing that can be said anymore. Teresa says that she's heartbroken, and she keeps saying this like Italian thing. Joe says that he will never say never, and that he will always, always love her. Something were to happen to her tomorrow, he would be right there. But then she says that, what's the point of that? Honor me while I'm alive, not while I'm dead. Then Joe tells Louis, you know what? Forget about me. I'll forget about you. Then Louis gets up and shakes Frank and Joe's hand. That was actually very surprising. And then when the husbands are dismissed, Louis goes over to John and Rachel. And he says to Rachel, you're an amazing mother. You guys are great. You know, he was doing his thing that he likes to do, trying to be the mediator. And John, Fuda, says, not today, Satan. He says, if you want to be my friend, you're going to have to admit what you did. You investigated this woman in prison. I know it. And like I said earlier, the amount of certainty and just how firm John was while saying this, and the envelope he had on his hand, I think he's telling the truth, you know? But Joe actually had to go and separate them. So honestly, it looks like John Fuda won the reunion. But like I said, the men leave, and then they go back for final thoughts with the housewives. Dolores says that it's unfortunate that nothing was accomplished, that maybe it's just going to have to take some time. Danielle says that she doesn't know what to do with her brother. Jennifer, she says that she's going to put everything behind her. Here, I want to say this since we're ending the season. Even if you're a Jennifer Aydin fan, you have to admit this was her worst season ever. But Margaret goes up also, and she says that she's very forgiving, then she has no negative energy towards anyone. Rachel as well says that she's happy to move on with Danielle and have a new friendship. But last but not least, Teresa and Melissa. Andy says that it was definitely interesting to see that despite their problems, they were able to coexist throughout the season. And Teresa says that was the case only because she tried everything because of the wedding. But she says that now the chapter is closed, the door is closed, and it looks like Teresa is done with Melissa. But Melissa has the last word, and she says that, you know what, she sees the hate that Teresa has for her, but she isn't hateful. And she says that despite everything, she does love Teresa, and that whatever happens, happens. Then they bring out some pizza and wine, and Dolores leads them with a cheer, and season 13 of The Real Housewives of New Jersey ends. Wow, this third part of the reunion was definitely very intense. I was definitely shocked and the edge of my seat the entire episode. Tomorrow, Peacock is going to release an uncensored extended version, so I will definitely be watching that. But as far as this part, you guys, like I said, I think that Melissa and Joe were the ones that came out on top, because Teresa and Louis, whether you like to admit it or not, they came out looking very dumb. And it's very surprising because when I started covering the season, I was on Teresa's side, but I feel like after the finale and after all the things that we saw, I was like, wait a minute, I don't think Teresa is like being too nice, and neither is Louis. So I was kind of leaning towards Melissa and Joe, and I think that they definitely won. But as far as this whole private investigator stuff, it's a mess. I think it's going a little bit too far. And like I said, John Fuda was very, very, very certain that it happened. I don't know if he would lie about that, but I am very interested to see how this group moves forward, because when you're hiring private investigators and bringing up the past and all this, it's really hard for you to connect with someone. So I don't know. We still haven't heard anything for next season. We know that the season is currently on pause. They would have already started filming by now, but because they just don't know how to move on, they haven't figured that out yet. But I'm sure we'll be getting reports in the following weeks now, especially since the third part already aired. But yeah, you guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all have a great one, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.